Disturbing true trucker horror story. I've been driving long-haul trucks for nearly 2 decades, and in that time, I've seen it all. The good, the bad, and the downright terrifying. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that night on Highway 377. It was late October, and the air was thick with the kind of chill that bites right through your skin. I was hauling a load of lumber out of Texas, headed up to a mill in Oklahoma. The road was long and empty, just me and the hum of the engine to keep me company. The CB radio was quiet, which was odd. Usually there'd be at least a couple of guys talking trash or warning each other about speed traps, but that night it was dead silent. I had just passed through the small town of Junction, the last real blip of civilization before the road stretched out into the desolate Texas backcountry. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. I remember glancing at the clock, 12:37 a.m. The road ahead was empty, just a straight shot through nothingness. About an hour into the drive, I saw it, a figure standing in the road on the right side, near the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a deer or some other animal. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person. A woman. She was standing perfectly still, her head slightly bowed, long dark hair hanging down to her shoulders. Her clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of the 1940s. A long dress that fluttered slightly in the breeze. My first instinct was to stop, maybe offer her a ride, but something held me back. There was something off about her, something that sent a shiver down my spine. As I got closer, I could see her more clearly in the dim light of my headlights. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and she wasn't moving, just standing there like a statue. I slowed down as I passed her, trying to get a better look. But the moment my truck was parallel with her, she suddenly lifted her head and looked right at me. Her eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. They were dark, hollow, like twin voids staring straight into my soul. My heart pounded in my chest, and I slammed on the gas, speeding away from her as fast as I could. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her chasing after me, but there was nothing. Just the empty road behind me. The radio crackled to life, but instead of the usual chatter, all I heard was static. I tried to shake it off, convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't get her face out of my head. Those eyes. It felt like they were burned into my brain. I drove on, the miles slipping away beneath my tires. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to that woman. Where had she come from? What was she doing out there in the middle of nowhere at this hour? About 20 minutes later, just as I was starting to calm down, I saw her again. This time, she was standing in the middle of the road, directly in my path. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I fought to bring the rig to a stop. The truck shuddered and groaned, the load shifting dangerously behind me. But I managed to stop just a few feet from where she was standing. She was looking right at me, those hollow eyes locked onto mine through the windshield. I could feel my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't drive forward without hitting her, but the thought of getting out of the truck sent a wave of terror through me. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, just staring at each other. The radio was still crackling with static, louder now, almost like it was trying to drown out the silence. I reached for the mic, thinking maybe I could call out to another driver, but before I could even touch it, she vanished. 1 second she was there, and the next, she was gone, just disappeared into thin air. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen, but there was nothing. No sign of her at all. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I threw the truck into gear and took off, not caring about the speed limit, not caring about anything except getting as far away from that place as possible. The road twisted and turned, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Ghosts aren't real, I kept telling myself. It was just a trick of the light, maybe some kind of shadow, or maybe I was just tired. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen her twice now, and there was no denying that something wasn't right. I drove for what felt like hours, not stopping, not even slowing down until I saw the lights of a truck stop up ahead. I pulled in, my hands still shaking as I killed the engine. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of other rigs parked in the lot, but the lights were on inside the diner. I stumbled out of the truck and made my way inside, the warmth of the diner a welcome relief from the cold night air. The waitress behind the counter looked up as I walked in, giving me a nod. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded, sliding into a booth near the window. My hands were still trembling as I wrapped them around the mug she placed in front of me. The coffee was hot and bitter, but I didn't care. I just needed something to ground me, something to remind me I was still here, still alive. I stared out the window, half expecting to see her standing out there in the parking lot, but all I saw were the shadows of the trucks and the dim glow of the streetlights. The door to the diner jingled as another trucker walked in. He was older, grizzled, with a thick beard and a worn-out cap. He nodded at me as he passed, then sat down at the counter. The waitress poured him a cup of coffee, and they started chatting, the low murmur of their voices blending with the soft hum of the neon lights. I sat there for a long time, just staring into my coffee, trying to make sense of what had happened. I knew I couldn't stay there all night. I had a delivery to make, and the clock was ticking. But the thought of getting back on that road, of possibly seeing her again, filled me with a dread I couldn't shake. Finally, I forced myself to get up, leave some cash on the table, and head back out to my truck. The night air hit me like a slap in the face, cold and sharp. I climbed into the cab, my hands still trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I sat there for a moment, taking deep breaths, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. I pulled out of the truck stop, back onto the highway, and into the darkness. For the rest of the drive, I kept the radio on, filling the cab with the sound of country music and late-night talk shows. Anything to keep the silence at bay. I didn't see her again, but every time I passed a shadow, every time a tree or a signpost loomed out of the darkness, my heart skipped a beat. When I finally reached the mill, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I backed the truck into the loading dock, my hands still trembling as I unhooked the trailer. As I drove away, I took one last look at the empty road behind me, half expecting to see her standing there in the daylight. But there was nothing. Just the road, stretching out into the distance, leading back to where she had first appeared. I haven't driven that route since. I made sure of it. Even now, years later, I can't get her out of my mind. I still see her in my dreams, standing by the side of the road, waiting for the next driver to pass by. If you ever find yourself on Highway 377 late at night, and you see a woman standing by the side of the road, don't stop. Just keep driving. Trust me, you don't want to know what happens if you don't.